In this video I will steal one of the most well-preserved ancient Egyptian paintings, which is one of the greatest treasures of the British Museum in London, and I will hang it in my room. If you like my content, the videos I make, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up, because your support allows me to work on the podcast and other types of contents like this, and you are very appreciated. Thank you. So I visited the British Museum in 2021 and I fell in love with this painting at first sight, deciding that I want this on my wall no matter what. The painting depicts Nebamun, a middle-ranking ancient Egyptian officer standing on a boat with his wife standing behind him and his daughter sitting beneath him while he is hunting in the marshes. He's holding a throw stick in one hand and 3 decoy herons in the other. I also love the details on the cat, which is also catching some birds. The hieroglyphs say that Nebamun is enjoying himself and seeing beauty, which means he has control over the chaotic powers in the afterlife. This 18th dynasty painting was found in the Theban necropolis located on the west side of the Nile at present-day Luxor, and it could have been produced around 1350 BC. The main material is plaster, and it's amazing how the colors have been preserved and remain mesmerizing even after 3 millennia. The tomb was discovered around 1820 by Giovanni da Tanasi, who was working for the British Consul General Henry Salt. Da Tanasi and his workmen hacked out pieces they wanted from the tomb walls, which were richly and skillfully decorated with similar fresco paintings. The British Museum purchased the painting in 1821 from Salt, and da Tanasi later died in poverty without revealing the tomb's exact location.
Breaking news: the British Museum returned stolen Egyptian artifacts. In an unprecedented and historic decision, the British Museum announced that it had returned all Egyptian artifacts obtained through colonial-era looting back to Egypt. This decision marked a significant step towards addressing historical injustices and restoring cultural heritage to its rightful owners.
This isn't going to work. There must be another way. Actually, there is another way.
First, I needed a high-resolution print of the painting in A0 form, which is basically 841 x 1189 mm. I obtained the original photo from the museum's website, used an AI tool to scale it up, and mirrored it since it will be glued upside down. There are free and paid services for scaling up images with deep neural networks, and in my opinion it's a quite effective way of upscaling, and even the guy at the printer was surprised by not only the colors, but also the beautiful resolution. I wanted to make a plaster sheet as the base of the painting as it was originally, but I did not want to just buy a precisely machined sheet of plasterboard, so I decided to create a frame and cast the plaster. I used 4 wooden planks to create the mold frame. I screwed them together at the 4 corners and paid attention to follow the size of the print. Since I was making a mold and wanted to go the simplest way, I used a plastic table sheet as the back of the mold. I roughly cut the sheet to shape and just stapled it around the frame. I had to think about how I was going to hang the picture, and I wanted to hang it as close to the wall as possible. So I decided to sink a hanger that would also hold, and I could insert a tough screw relatively easily. Eventually I settled on this type of cabinet suspensions. When you have no workshop, crafting in an apartment is not so easy, especially when you have a flatmate and you are making an enormous mess. Fortunately, I could borrow his huge bin, so I could mix the 10 kilograms of plaster and then clean up for a couple of days. The easiest way to stir the mix until the bubbles and lumps disappeared was with my hand, basically. A couple of times I had to adjust the water, but eventually it turned out fine. And yes, that is another aspect of crafting without a workshop. It could go wrong 100 different ways. So I just put the mold in my room, knowing nothing about how it would hold, and just poured the mix into it. Yes, the leveling of the floor was obviously not the best, but I was lucky, as always. It held the plaster inside, and I just had to adjust a bit with my hand to make sure the plaster went everywhere inside the mold. I was really lucky, and the frame held this heavy mix weighing roughly 15 kilograms. After pouring, adjusting and leveling, I inserted the suspension points. And yes, I'm an engineer, but it didn't look like it. I know, I just placed the suspensions without exactly measuring their points relative to each other, but it turned out good. Another important part was reinforcement. I didn't know exactly how fragile this heavy bulk of plaster would be, so I really wanted to add some glass fiber to the mix to make it much stronger. So I roughly cut enough pieces of this glass fiber and measured on the original print, and then just inserted them into the cast and tried to sink them in. Yeah, I know, the fork was not the most efficient tool to use. Eventually, the cast turned out to be quite resistant and robust, so it was a good idea. Finally, I just smoothed out the surface, but it was not really necessary. After 6 days of drying, I finally dared to remove the frame and dismantle the mold. I was a bit scared of breaking the sheet when lifting it up for the first time because I didn't know if it was dry enough. But as I said, I was lucky. The next step was to hollow out the interior of the suspensions so the massive screws could fit. Then I went through the back side, removed the excess plaster and tried to smooth it again. Since I could not pour on a perfectly leveled surface, the edges were thicker compared to the middle and the bottom was wider than the top, So I wanted to make them even. I used a few packs of plaster bandage to reinforce the edges of the sheet because I was a bit afraid that they would break. After the post-processing of the backside, I used sandpaper on the front to ensure the acrylic gel, which functioned as the glue in the following steps basically, would fix the print properly on the surface. So I put a thick layer of this matte acrylic gel on the plaster and a tiny layer on the print, which made it harder to handle, but after a funny 5 minutes of fighting, I could properly place it on the surface of the plaster sheet. Good advice. Don't print only one copy, because you can remove it from the plaster relatively easily in case you mess it up, but if you had only one, that sucks. I had to fight a lot with the wrinkles because too many of them would prevent proper attachment and would look ugly too, but eventually, as always, it turned out well. I waited 3 days to ensure it was properly dried and I could remove the paperback of the print. This was a normal laser print, but by mirroring the image and gluing it to the plaster with acrylic gel, the ink was basically transferred completely onto the plaster because it sunk into the acrylic and created a new consistent layer. I just had to remove the paper of the print with wet hands and a lot of patience. I also had to be careful not to damage the ink layer. Sometimes I was not that careful and did damage it, but it just made it more authentic in my opinion. What do you think? After the first session of rubbing, this sounds weird, but after the first session of rubbing, it was not ready, which was clearly visible after the wet paper kind of dried out, so I did it again. Yeah, a lot of patience. Once the rubbing was finished, this is still funny, sorry, I started to shape the outline of the plaster based on the original image. I removed the corners and tried to follow the original shape. Fortunately, the cast happened to be quite strong. It was not that easy to break. Yeah, I made a huge mess again, but I got closer to the original look at least. The original plaster was hacked out from the walls of the tomb, and there were parts where the painting had already flaked off, and I tried to recreate these imperfections as well. I had to remove the acrylic layer from these parts and start to scratch it first with a screwdriver and then with a cutter blade. Again, mess was part of the story, but it started to look like the original one finally. There were several parts inside the picture that I had to cut out, and I had to be particularly cautious not to damage the rest of the image. After all the parts were removed, I applied a bit of acrylic again on the cuts, preventing the layer from coming up. Finally, it looked more and more like I wanted. It just needed some color to look old and dirty. Acrylic paint, since it's soluble in water, is surprisingly satisfying material to work with. Easy to dilute, wash out and apply. I tried to use a high dilution ratio because I wanted it to look dirty and not painted. So the trick was to use a very small amount of highly diluted acrylic paint in several layers and let it soak into the plaster pores.
surface imperfections actually helped a lot, which is why I scratched these parts intentionally. I'm not a good painter, but I was happy with the result. Until my friend pointed out that my version is more curved than the original and the edges are not that nice. So I decided to make these edges a bit thinner. After a long painting session, it's kind of weird to just break off your work that you have created, but everything for the cause. I wanted it to be as realistic as possible, so I actually removed a lot of material again and had to paint these parts, but I think it made it better. Thanks, Ramon, for the advice. And the cracks. I made artificial cracks according to the original piece, so I made cuts, scratches and some thin painting again. After weeks of work, it finally looked like it. I was really happy that I could reach a point where it was very close to the original, and every imperfection in the work just made it better, at least in my opinion. But maybe I'm biased, who knows. As the final touch, I applied some UV protective finish to make the colors more vibrant and to avoid or try to slow down the fading. And there you have it, our very own replica of the Nebamun hunting in the marshes tomb painting, now proudly displayed in my bedroom. It's been quite an adventure, to be honest, but every bit of effort was worth it to recreate this incredible piece of history. If you enjoyed this journey and my work, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and helps me to continue creating podcast episodes and other types of content full-time. Feel free to leave a comment below, letting me know what you think or what other projects you would like to see next. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.